Member for Barara.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Queen Elizabeth II is mourned throughout the world, not only for who she was but what she represented, a set of values that are as important today as at any time in our history. First, the Queen represented the ideals of monarchy, encompassing values of duty, service, honour, dignity, tradition, continuity, stability, of grandeur yet understatement, and leadership beyond politics. Second, she represented her family and provided a link between all of Australia's monarchs, from George III to Charles III, and beyond to the next generations, William V and George VII. In particular, she was a link to her revered parents, George VI and the Queen Mother. Third, the Queen represented the wartime generation, and that is why losing the Queen is like losing a beloved grandmother. In a sense, she was everybody's grandmother. She was a living link to that greatest generation which put country before self, a generation whose values of service, modesty, dignity and thrift helped reshape the post-war world for the better, a generation that prevailed through depression and war to rebuild the world with hope and optimism. We have, in a sense, lost our anchor to that world and to those values and find ourselves adrift, bobbing like a cork on the sea. The Queen's generation projected a sense of moral clarity less observed today. It was a generation which fewer people were formally educated and yet seemed wiser. A generation in Great Britain, Australia and the Commonwealth that stood alone against the tyranny of Nazism. A generation in which the commitment to faith was the norm. And the generation which had more in common with each other because of the shared privations of depression and war. That common experience was shared by the Queen and her family remaining in London during the Blitz. As the Queen Mother famously said, "The children won't go without me, I won't leave without the King, and the King will never leave." The strength of George VI in those days, not a strong man like the European dictators, but a man of character, set an example that inspired people across the globe. The stoicism of the royal family during the war represented a gritty British spirit and never-say-die attitude shared by Australians. Those then are the values that we mourn and the generation that we've lost, represented by the Queen. Queen Elizabeth was never meant to be Queen. She was born the eldest daughter of the Duke of York, the equivalent in today's generation of Princess Beatrice. She was 10 when her uncle Edward VIII abdicated in 1936, and the accession of her father George VI made her heir to the throne. It's hard for us to imagine what it must be like at age 10 to have a responsibility like the crown thrust upon you, to have no choice in the matter and to do that job for the rest of your life right up until the day you die. It makes the Queen's flawless service even more extraordinary. On her 21st birthday broadcast she said, "My whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service." It was a promise that she kept till the end. During the war she served as a mechanic in the British Army and later assumed a number of honorary military roles in the Australian Army and the RAF Reserves. When George VI died in 1952, Queen Elizabeth acceded the throne at age 25. She went on to become our longest-serving sovereign, and in 1954 became the first reigning monarch to tour Australia. 75% of Australians saw her on that tour. She went on to visit Australia a further 15 times, the most recent being 2011. The Queen's interest in Australia and Australians remained deep and abiding, and she took particular interest in Indigenous Australians and attended Indigenous events during visits. She was the patron of nearly 30 organisations. Queen Elizabeth touched the lives of millions of Australians. People like Richard and Gren Howes of Barara, who watched the Queen's coronation procession travel up London's Northumberland Avenue. Richard hung a piece of rope from a lamp post for a foothold to get a better view of the Queen. During Queen Elizabeth's first visit to Australia, Jeanette Batchelor, a member of the Anglican Girls Friendly Society, was in the Guard of Honour outside St Andrew's Cathedral when the Queen attended a morning service. In 1986, Sue Batho of Beecroft was invited to attend a garden party at Buckingham Palace. She records with pride her English father standing to attention when Rule Britannia was prayed. Graham Bruce, Secretary of the Glenorrhea RSL sub-branch, led the air transport security team responsible for the Queen and Prince Philip during their visit to New Zealand in 1990. Dorothy and Greg Davidson of Cheltenham saw the Queen during many of her visits to Sydney, and on one such visit the Queen spoke to Dorothy's late mother. When the Daily Telegraph took a photo, it became a significant keepsake for Dorothy. And Graham Ross of Beecroft was honoured with Queen Victoria's Gold Veitch Memorial Medal at Hampton Court for his work filming an Anzac Poppies project and was invited by Her Majesty to film her private garden. As we contemplate a world without Queen Elizabeth II, we give thanks for her life of service. We pray for the life and health of our new King Charles III. May he be inspired by the life and example of his late mother, and may her memory be a blessing to us all.
The question is that